Hello, and welcome to our 13th podcast episode, Timeless Love in a Dystopian World, The Forbidden Affair. I'm Thomas, and I am here with my old friend Timothy. Tonight, we are going to talk about a film called Code 46. As always, spoilers ahead. Code 46 is a 2003 British film directed by Michael Winterbottom, written by Frank Cottrell Boyce, and starring Tim Robbins and Samantha Morton. Produced by BBC Films and Revolution Films, the film is a dystopian sci-fi love story exploring the implications of current trends in biotechnology. So, Tim, did you like Code 46?
Well, Tom, I found it passable at best. It's clear that the filmmakers were trying to create something thought-provoking with this story of love in a dystopian future, but ultimately they fell short for me. The pacing was quite slow, and there wasn't enough action or suspense to really keep my interest.
I have to admit, Tim, that the plot did take some time to develop, but I appreciated how it slowly built up the tension between William and Maria. And once their forbidden love affair began, it felt like the stakes were raised significantly. The world they lived in was so controlled and oppressive. Their relationship seemed even more taboo because of that.
I can see what you mean about the tension building up, Tom, but I found myself getting bored with some of the exposition early on. It felt like we were spending too much time in William's world as an insurance fraud investigator before we even met Maria. Plus, there were times when the dialogue felt clunky and unnatural to me.
Well, I think part of that may have been intentional. It was meant to show how mundane William's life was before he encountered Maria. And as for the dialogue, while there were moments where it seemed a bit forced, overall I found it effective in conveying the emotions and desperation of these characters living in such a restrictive society.
Yes, I agree that some of the dialogue felt forced at times. However, what really bothered me was the way the film handled the science behind the world it created. It seemed like they were trying to create a believable dystopia by introducing concepts like genetic matching and cloning, but it all felt very superficial. The explanation of Code 46 itself was quite vague. We're told that it has something to do with violating genetic matches between partners, but there isn't much depth or clarity on how this works or why it matters.
You raise an interesting point, Tim. I think the filmmakers were more focused on telling a compelling story than explaining every intricate detail about their dystopian world. They did provide enough context for us to understand that genetic matching was important and that any violation had serious consequences. What I found particularly thought-provoking was the idea of cloning as a means to control population growth or maintain specific bloodlines. It made me think about how far our society might go in pursuit of these goals if given the opportunity.
Well, Tom, I can see where you're coming from with that perspective, but personally, I feel like when you create a world as complex and unique as Code 46's dystopia, it's important to give your audience some clear guidelines about how things work. Otherwise, it becomes difficult for them to fully immerse themselves in the story or empathize with the characters' situations. And speaking of immersion, I found the visuals quite disappointing at times. The film relies heavily on computer-generated imagery, which often look cheap and unconvincing compared to some of the other elements of the production design.
Well, I understand your concerns about immersion and clarity in terms of understanding their dystopian world. However, I believe that part of Code 46's charm lies in its ambiguity. It forces us to fill in the blanks ourselves, which makes our engagement with the story more personal. As for the visuals, while there are some moments where CG falls short compared to practical effects or set design, I think they did an adequate job of creating a believable future world on a limited budget. The film's strength lies in its themes and character development rather than its special effects anyway.
Well said, Tom. Speaking of characters, I found the two leads to be quite compelling despite their flaws. Tim Robbins does an excellent job portraying William as a man torn between his loyalty to his job and his growing feelings for Maria. And Samantha Morton is equally convincing as Maria. She conveys both her vulnerability and strength incredibly well throughout the film. Their chemistry on screen was palpable despite the challenges they faced in bringing their forbidden love to life.
I couldn't agree more, Tim. Both Robbins and Morton did an exceptional job of bringing these complex characters to life. They made us feel for William and Maria, even when they were making choices that we might not necessarily agree with or understand completely. It's a testament to their acting abilities that we could empathize with them despite the limitations of the script in some areas.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that both Robbins and Morton elevated the material through their performances alone. However, there were still aspects of a Code 46 that left me feeling underwhelmed or unsatisfied. The ending in particular felt rushed. After building up this intense love story between William and Maria, it all comes crashing down very quickly without much resolution. It almost felt like an afterthought rather than a natural conclusion to their journey together.
That's an interesting take on the ending, Tim. While I can see how you might find it abrupt or unsatisfying, I personally liked how it left us with more questions than answers about William and Maria's fate after they parted ways at the end of their journey together. It forces us to reflect on their story long after we finish watching the film, which adds an extra layer of depth to our experience as viewers. Well, Tim, I think we've covered quite a bit about Code 46 so far. But before we wrap up this segment of our podcast, let's talk briefly about something that really stood out to me: the film's soundtrack. Composed by Dan Licht and Richard Patrick, it perfectly captures the mood and tone of this dystopian world while also adding an emotional depth to key moments in the story. I particularly liked how they used electronic instruments and atmospheric sounds to create a sense of isolation and loneliness during scenes where William is grappling with his feelings for Maria or navigating through his daily life as an insurance fraud investigator.
Yes, I agree that the soundtrack was quite effective in setting the stage for Code 46's world. There were moments when the music would swell up during scenes between William and Maria, where you could really feel their connection despite all the obstacles they faced. However, there were also times when it felt like the score tried too hard to be emotional or dramatic, which took me out of the experience a bit. Do you remember any specific moments where this happened for you, Tom?
Well, Tim, I can definitely see what you mean about some scenes feeling overly dramatic at times. But overall, I think they did an excellent job in creating a cohesive soundscape that enhanced our viewing experience without distracting from the story itself. And speaking of soundscapes, let's not forget how important sound design was to this film as well. The way they used ambient noise and dialogue to create tension during chase scenes or interrogation rooms really added another layer of realism to Code 46's dystopian world.
Yes, I completely agree with you there, Tom. Sound design played a crucial role in this film, especially when it came to creating an immersive environment for the audience. It helped us feel like we were right there alongside William and Maria as they navigated through their dangerous and forbidden relationship. So, final thoughts on Code 46's soundtrack and sound design before we move on?
Well, Tim, while there were moments where I felt like the score could have been a bit more subtle, overall I thought it was very effective in enhancing our viewing experience of this unique film. And as for the sound design, it truly helped to create an immersive world that we could lose ourselves in despite some of the story's shortcomings. So, moving on from Code 46's technical aspects, let's talk about how its themes and messages resonate with us as viewers and continue our discussion about whether this film is worth watching or not.
Yes, I think it's important that we discuss how well the actors brought these characters to life. As you mentioned earlier, both Tim Robbins and Samantha Morton did an exceptional job with their roles in Code 46. They had great chemistry on screen, which made their forbidden love story all the more compelling. William, played by Robbins, was a complex character who struggled with his loyalty to his job and his growing feelings for Maria. He was initially portrayed as someone content with his mundane life, but eventually realized that there was more to life than simply following rules and regulations. His transformation throughout the film was skillfully handled by Robbins, showcasing both his vulnerability and strength. On the other hand, Samantha Morton brought Maria to life in a way that made us empathize with her plight. She played the role with an incredible mix of innocence and resilience, making it impossible not to root for her character despite her circumstances. The scenes where she had to confront her feelings about her past and her uncertain future were particularly moving, thanks in a large part to Morton's powerful performance.
Absolutely. It's amazing how well these two actors brought out the depth of their characters despite the limitations imposed by the script at times. They managed to elevate Code 46 with their performances alone, making it a more engaging and emotionally resonant experience for viewers. Now, moving on from our discussion about the actors and their roles in Code 46, let's talk about some of the film's themes that really stood out to me. One of the most prominent themes is the dangers of a society that seeks control over every aspect of its citizens' lives. The concept of genetic matching as a means for social stability is taken to an extreme here, with severe consequences for those who dare to defy these strict rules. Another theme worth exploring is the power of love and human connection despite adversity. Despite all odds stacked against them, William and Maria find solace in each other's company, risking everything just for a chance at happiness together. Their relationship serves as a beacon of hope amidst this bleak dystopian world, where individuality seems to have been stripped away from people altogether. So, Tim, given our discussion about the actors and themes in Code 46, what are your final thoughts on whether or not it's worth watching? Do you think its strengths outweigh its flaws, or vice versa?
Well, Tom, after our in-depth discussion about the various aspects of Code 46, it's clear that this film has its strengths and weaknesses. On one hand, we have an intriguing dystopian world with a unique concept of genetic matching, which could have been further explored to provide more clarity for viewers. On the other hand, we have some great performances from both Tim Robbins and Samantha Morton, who manage to elevate their characters despite the limitations imposed by the script. The themes of love conquering all odds and society's obsession with control are very well executed throughout the film. As for whether or not Code 46 is worth watching, I would have to say that it depends on one's personal preferences. If you're someone who enjoys a slow-paced, character-driven story with an emphasis on emotional depth and relationships, then this film might be right up your alley. However, if you prefer more action or plot-driven stories that provide clear explanations of their dystopian worlds, then Code 46 might not be the best choice for you. Personally, I found it to be an interesting watch with some powerful moments, but felt that it could have benefited from a bit more clarity in terms of its storytelling and world-building elements.
Thank you for your insights on Code 46, Tim. It's always great to hear different perspectives on films like these. I found the film to be quite engaging, despite its flaws, because it managed to evoke strong emotions from me throughout the story. The performances by both Robbins and Morton were truly outstanding in my opinion, and they helped carry the film when some of the plot points fell flat or felt rushed. As for whether it's worth watching, I think that ultimately comes down to personal taste. If you're someone who enjoys character, conflict-driven stories with an emphasis on relationships and emotion, then Code 46 is definitely worth checking out. However, if you prefer films with more action or a clearer sense of world building, then this might not be the best fit for you. In conclusion, while I understand Tim's reservations about certain aspects of the film, I found myself captivated by its themes and performances enough to overlook some of these shortcomings. It's a movie that makes you think about the consequences of a society that seeks complete control over every aspect of its citizens' lives, while also celebrating the power of love and human connection in even the most dire circumstances.
Absolutely, Tom. Now, let's shift our focus towards discussing the cultural impact of Code 46. This film was released in 2003 and is often cited as one of the earliest examples of dystopian fiction that explores themes related to biotechnology and genetic engineering. It raises some important questions about the potential consequences of our current trends in these fields, specifically how they might be used for social control or manipulation. This film came out at a time when there was already growing concern about issues like genetically modified foods, cloning, and privacy invasions due to advancements in technology.
Yes, Timothy. I remember watching Code 46 when it first came out and being deeply affected by its themes of social control and the consequences of unchecked technological advancement. It made me think about how easily our society could slip into such a dystopian future if we're not careful. The film also highlights the importance of individuality and freedom, which are values that I believe are still relevant today, given some of the current political climate around the world.
Indeed, Tom. Another aspect of Code 46 that resonated with audiences was its portrayal of a love story set against such a bleak backdrop. The idea that two people could find solace and happiness in each other despite living in such a controlled society spoke volumes about the resilience of the human spirit. This theme of hope amidst despair is something that has been explored in many dystopian stories since then. But Code 46 remains one of the most poignant examples due to its powerful performances and thought-provoking themes.
I agree with you, Tim. The love story between William and Maria serves as a beacon of hope for viewers who might feel overwhelmed by the film's darker theme. It reminds us that even in the face of adversity, there's always room for human connection and empathy. This message is particularly important today, when we're constantly bombarded with negative news and divisive rhetoric.
Well said, Tom. In conclusion, Code 46 has had a significant cultural impact due to its thought-provoking exploration of themes related to biotechnology, social control, and individuality. It raises important questions about our current trajectory as a society, while also offering hope through its portrayal of the human spirit's resilience in the face of adversity. The film's enduring legacy can be seen not only in subsequent dystopian stories, but also in our ongoing conversations about privacy, ethics, and the implications of emerging technologies.
Absolutely, Tim. Now let's shift our focus towards discussing our final thoughts on Code 46. As we've discussed throughout this podcast, there are definitely some strong points to this film. The performances by Robbins and Morton were truly outstanding, and it raises important questions about the potential consequences of our current trends in biotechnology and genetic engineering. However, I also understand where you're coming from with your concerns about the world, building and pacing of the story.
Yes, Tom. It's clear that Code 46 is a film that will continue to spark debates and discussions among viewers for years to come. Despite its flaws, I believe it offers an engaging exploration of important themes that are relevant in our society today. And as you mentioned earlier, the performances by Robbins and Morton make this film well worth watching, despite any reservations one might have about its narrative or world-building elements.
Exactly. So, To conclude our discussion on Code 46, I would say that while it may not be perfect, it is an ambitious and thought-provoking piece of cinema that manages to capture the essence of what a good dystopian film should be. Unsettling, emotionally resonant, and filled with powerful performances. And who knows, maybe some viewers will walk away from this film feeling inspired, or at least more aware of the potential consequences of our current trajectory when it comes to technology and social control.
Well said, Tom. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on this discussion about Code 46. We hope you enjoyed our insights into this fascinating film as much as we did. Remember to comment, subscribe, and like the video if you found it helpful or interesting. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the world of cinema